I saved for 10 years to buy a home. My cheating sister demanded it for her lawyer, then showed up at my job and tried to ruin my career. My sister Clara, who is 3 years older than me, was married 5 years ago to a truly great guy who we can call James. James's family has a good amount of money, so while they are not super rich, they are very comfortable, and he is also a successful professional who earns a very good income on his own. My sister, on the other hand, has never been very focused on building a career for herself, having worked some part-time jobs before she met James, but she never had any real savings or long-term plans to speak of. Her interests were always more in social activities and enjoying the moment, which is certainly her choice to make. When she and James decided to get married, his parents were quite involved in the planning, and they were paying for a large part of the wedding, while also helping them with a down payment on a house. Because of this financial involvement, their lawyers suggested that a prenuptial agreement would be a wise decision. James was very gentle when he brought it up to my sister, explaining that it was mainly a measure to protect his family's assets and his own premarital savings, and he described it as just a standard procedure for his family. The prenup essentially stated that, in the unfortunate event of a divorce, they would each leave the marriage with the assets they had brought into it. Any wealth they built together during the marriage would be split between them, but his inheritance and pre-existing family wealth were to remain off limits. The agreement also contained a very clear infidelity clause, which specified that if either of them was unfaithful, the unfaithful party would not be entitled to any form of spousal support or any share of the assets that were accumulated during the marriage. My sister was not at all happy about the prenup at the time, and their discussions about it led to a lot of arguments. My mom even got involved in the dispute, telling my sister that she found the whole idea to be insulting. Throughout this entire process, I chose to stay out of it completely, as I believed it was their relationship and therefore their decision to make together. In the end, my sister did sign the agreement because she wanted the big wedding and the comfortable lifestyle that came with being married to James, so she agreed to his family's condition. For 5 years, their life together seemed to be perfect from every angle. They lived in a beautiful house and were able to travel quite a lot, and my sister never had to work because James was very good to her and paid for everything. He bought her a nice car and made sure she had a generous allowance for whatever she wanted, making it look like a very happy marriage to anyone who saw them. He always seemed to love her very much, and he was consistently kind and respectful to our family, including me. I have always been more of a quiet and reserved person, and I have a stable job in a technical field that I have worked very hard for. While I do not make a huge amount of money, I am very careful and responsible with it, so I have been saving aggressively for years with the goal of buying my own small apartment. This has been my single biggest focus in life, and my family knows this well, so they are fully aware that I have a substantial amount of money saved up. About a month ago, this entire situation completely blew up in a terrible way. My sister went out with some old friends from her hometown, and during the evening she ended up meeting her high school ex-boyfriend at a bar. One thing apparently led to another, and she ended up spending the night with him. She was not discreet about her actions at all, and someone who knows both her and James saw them together, who then told James's friend, who then proceeded to tell James. There was simply no way for her to deny what had happened, and when he confronted her, she admitted it to him. James was, by all accounts, completely devastated by the news, and he asked her to pack a bag and leave their house that very same day. He told her in no uncertain terms that he would be filing for divorce immediately, remaining completely firm on his decision because he said he could never trust her again. My sister then came to my mom's house in a complete state of distress, crying and saying that her life was over. For the past month, my mom's house has become the center of all this drama, while my sister has been staying there, spending her days calling lawyers and desperately trying to find a way to challenge the prenup she willingly signed. This all leads to what happened last night, when my mom and sister sat me down for a very serious talk. They explained to me that the lawyers my sister has spoken to have all told her the same thing, which is that the prenup is very strong and ironclad, especially with the clear infidelity clause. They said that fighting it in court would be incredibly expensive, and the chances of actually winning were extremely low. My sister has no money of her own to fund such a fight, as she has no savings at all, despite the generous allowance James had given her for years, because she spent it all on clothes, salon visits and lunches with her friends. My sister then explained that her only remaining option was to hire a very aggressive and very expensive lawyer who claims to specialize in challenging these kinds of agreements. She told me this lawyer believes there might be a small, slim chance to argue for some kind of settlement, but it would require a long and messy court battle to even attempt. Then they finally got to the main point of the conversation, when my sister told me that she needed $50,000 for the legal retainer and the upcoming fees for this lawyer. She looked directly at me, with my mom sitting right next to her and nodding in support, and she asked me to give her the money from my personal savings. I sat there for a moment, just to make sure I had heard them correctly, as I could hardly believe they wanted me to give them the money I had saved for my apartment. The same money I had worked for every single day for the last 10 years. They wanted me to hand it over to my sister so she could try to get money from her husband, the man whom she had cheated on. I told them no. I remained very calm and collected when I just said, "No, I am not going to do that." The reaction to my refusal was immediate and incredibly explosive. My sister started screaming at me and calling me selfish, yelling that I had always been jealous of her and that I was happy to see her suffer now. She insisted that she was my sister, and that family was supposed to help each other no matter what the circumstances were. My mom quickly joined in, telling me that I had a duty to my sister and that I had plenty of money saved, while my sister had nothing. She said I was being heartless and that I was letting her down in her greatest time of need, even going so far as to say that this was all James's fault for having such a horrible prenup in the first place, framing my sister as the victim. I did not argue back with them, and instead, I just repeated that my answer was no. I told them that my savings were for my own future, and that I would not be spending them on her legal fees. I also said that her situation was a direct result of her own actions, because she signed the prenup and she was the one who was unfaithful. These were her choices, and I would not be the one paying for the consequences of those choices. I then stood up from my chair and left my mom's house, and since that moment, my phone has been blowing up with an endless stream of calls and texts from both of them. It has also expanded to include some of my aunts, who have only heard my sister's emotional and one-sided version of the story. They are all calling me selfish and unsupportive for my decision. I have not responded to any of them, and I feel like I am living in a crazy world. I am the one who worked hard and was responsible, while she is the one who made a terrible mistake and is now facing the consequences she agreed to in writing, yet somehow, I am being positioned as the bad guy in all of this. So, Reddit, AET for refusing to give my sister the money I saved for my own home to fund her divorce battle. Update 1. I want to thank everyone who commented on my original post, because it was incredibly helpful to see that I am not completely crazy for thinking the way I do. I have read a lot of the comments, and the judgment seems to be overwhelmingly NTA, for which I appreciate the clarity. I still have not engaged with my family since the big blowup, but the situation has unfortunately continued to get worse, so I thought I should post an update to document what has been happening since then. After I walked out of my mom's house that night, the angry texts and calls continued for 2 straight days without stopping. The messages were not just from my mom and sister Clara, because my mom had clearly called her sisters, my aunts, and had given them a very one-sided and emotional version of the events. As a result, I received long messages from 2 of my aunts telling me how deeply disappointed they were in me. They said that Clara had made a mistake, but insisted that James was being cruel by throwing her out with nothing. They lectured me that family is all we have and that I should be there for my sister, with one of them even saying that money is just paper, but family is forever. It is very easy for them to say such things, since none of them have offered Clara any of their own money, and they just expect me to be the one to provide it. I decided not to reply to any of these messages and instead put my phone on silent as I needed to focus on my work and the constant notifications were making it impossible. After about 48 hours of this continuous barrage, the messages finally stopped, and I thought that maybe they had given up and were going to leave me alone. I was very wrong, because the silence was just a prelude to them trying a new strategy. A few days ago, my sister Clara made a long and emotional post on her social media account. She did not use my name directly, but it was very obvious to anyone who knows us who she was talking about. She wrote a long, sad story about how she was going through the worst time of her life, writing about being heartbroken and abandoned by those closest to her. Then she added a specific part about how some family members, who you would think would be your biggest supporters, can turn out to be the most selfish people of all. She continued by writing about how some people hoard their money and would rather watch their own family drown than offer a helping hand, and she ended it with a vague sentence about how you really learn who your real family is during hard times. Many of her friends, who do not know the full story, left comments full of support for her, writing things about how she was so strong and how terrible it was that she was being treated this way. Some of our shared acquaintances, who follow both of us, have been looking at me strangely lately, and I know it is because they saw the post. My sister has always been very good at playing the victim, which is a skill she has been honing our whole lives. When we were kids, if she broke something, she would cry so convincingly that my parents would end up blaming me for upsetting her, and this feels like the adult version of that same behavior. The social media post was annoying, but I knew I could ignore it. What happened next, however, was much harder to ignore. Last night my mother showed up at my apartment building unannounced. I live in a secure building, so you need to be buzzed in to enter, and around 8 p.m., my intercom rang, revealing it was her. She had not called me beforehand to say she was coming, she just showed up on my doorstep. I did not want to let her in, but at the same time, I did not want her to make a scene in the lobby for all my neighbors to see, so I buzzed her up. The moment she got inside my apartment, she started in on me again, but she did not yell this time, instead trying a different tactic. She was crying as she told me that Clara was not eating and was crying all day long, and she claimed she was worried about Clara's mental health. She said that I was being cold, and that my refusal to help was pushing Clara over the edge. She informed me that James had officially served Clara with divorce papers and had already canceled all of her credit cards, leaving her completely dependent on my mom, who is retired and lives on a fixed income. She then went on to talk about my savings again, saying things like, "You have all this money just sitting in a bank account where it is not doing anything, while your sister is suffering right now. You can always make more money, but you only have one sister." I tried to explain to her that the money was not just sitting there, but that it was the result of years of personal sacrifice. I reminded her that I did not go on vacations, I do not buy expensive things, and I have worked overtime whenever possible, all to build that fund for my future security. Her demeanor changed instantly when I said that, and the tears stopped as her face became hard. She told me that our father, who passed away 10 years ago, would be ashamed of me for my selfishness, saying he always valued family above everything else. She then accused me of thinking I was better than them, simply because I had a better job and had saved my money, and she said that I was looking down on my sister. The conversation just went in circles from there, but I stood my ground and told her my decision was final. Eventually, she got very angry again and started pointing at things in my small apartment, like my television and my laptop, suggesting that I could sell those things if I really wanted to help. The entitlement she displayed was truly shocking, as she genuinely believes that my personal assets are a family resource pool that she and my sister should have free access to. I finally had enough of the circular argument and told her that I was done with the conversation and that she needed to leave my home. She flatly refused, sitting on my couch and stating she would not leave until I agreed to help my sister. I then told her that if she did not leave, I would have no choice but to call building security. That was when she finally stood up. She walked over to me, and for a moment, I honestly thought she might get physical. Instead, she just got very close to my face and told me that I would regret this, whispering that when I am old and alone with my money, I would remember this moment and realize what I had thrown away. Then she turned around and left, slamming the door hard behind her. I have now blocked my mom's and my sister's phone numbers, and I also blocked my aunts who were messaging me. I know this is a big step to take, but I feel like I have no other choice, because they will not respect my boundaries, and the pressure is not going to stop. I am worried about what they will try next, as the social media post and my mom showing up at my apartment feel like a significant escalation. I feel like this is just the beginning of a longer fight, and while I am not changing my mind about the money, I am starting to realize that my relationship with my mom and sister might be permanently broken because of this. Update. It has now been a few weeks since my last update, and I thought that blocking their numbers and having that final confrontation with my mother would be the end of the harassment. I was very naive to think that, because the situation has since escalated in ways I did not expect, and it has now directly impacted my professional life. After I blocked their numbers, I had about a week of wonderful peace, a quiet time where I could go to work, come home, and focus on my own life. I started to feel like I could finally move on from this whole mess. But then the emails started. They must have realized their phone numbers were blocked, so they simply moved to a different form of communication to get to me. The first email was from my sister Clara, and it was a long and rambling message that was a strange mix of accusations and begging. She wrote that James's lawyer had sent her own lawyer a letter, which officially stated their intention to enforce the prenup to its fullest extent, meaning she would be getting absolutely nothing. The letter also made it clear that they had definitive proof of her infidelity, so there was no point in even trying to fight that fact. Her email went on to say that her lawyer was now dropping her as a client because she could not pay the initial retainer fee, and she was clearly panicking. She accused me again of abandoning her and said that I was siding with James against her. She wrote that I had no idea what it was like to have your whole life pulled out from under you, conveniently forgetting to mention that she was the one who pulled the pin on the grenade. The email ended with another forceful demand for the $50,000, which she called her last chance to get any kind of justice. I did not reply to the email, and instead I created a filter to send any future emails from her, my mom, or my aunts directly to a separate folder that I do not check. A few days after that email, I was at work around 11 a.m. I was in the middle of a meeting with my team when one of the receptionists came over and quietly told me that I had a visitor waiting in the lobby. I was not expecting anyone, so I was confused. And when I got to the lobby, I was completely shocked to see my mother sitting there. I had never told my mother the exact name of my current company, but I suppose she figured it out somehow. I walked over and asked her what she was doing here, making sure to keep my voice low because the receptionist was right there at the desk. My mom stood up and began talking in a loud, dramatic voice for everyone to hear, saying that she was here because her daughter was in a terrible crisis and her other daughter was refusing to help. She claimed that she did not know what else to do, and that she was feeling desperate. My face was burning with humiliation as a few of my colleagues who were walking by slowed down to look at the unfolding scene. I tried to lead her out of the lobby, but she pulled her arm away from me and started crying loudly. She told me that Clara was going to be homeless soon, and that I was sitting here in my fancy office pretending like my family did not even exist. I told her that this was completely inappropriate and that she needed to leave immediately, but she just turned to the receptionist and said, "Can you believe it? Her own sister is suffering and she won't even help. What kind of person does that?" I was absolutely mortified, so I walked her to the door and essentially had to push her out of the building. She stood on the sidewalk, just outside the glass doors, and stared at me with a look of pure anger. I went back to my meeting and tried to pretend like nothing had happened, but it was impossible. My boss came over to my desk later in the day to ask if everything was okay, and while he was very professional about it, it was clear that the incident had caused a significant disruption. I just told him it was a private family matter and assured him that it would not happen again. That evening, I was so angry that I could barely think straight, because showing up at my job was a line I never thought even she would cross. It was such a clear and manipulative attempt to use public shame to get what she wanted. The next day, things managed to get even worse when Clara somehow found my work email address. She sent a new email, not just to me, but she also copied in my boss, whose email is listed on the company website, as well as the general HR email address for the company. The email she sent was a complete and utter fabrication of the truth, in which she wrote that I was withholding family funds that were supposed to be shared between us after our father passed away. She claimed that I was financially abusing my position as the supposed executor of his will, which is not true, as I am not and never was the executor of anything, and was leaving her destitute. To make her story more convincing, she attached a copy of the divorce filing from James's lawyer to prove her desperate situation, painting me as a cold, calculating thief who was stealing from her own sister. This created a massive problem for me at work, and my boss called me into his office immediately with a representative from HR, and they had her email printed out on the table. They were very serious as they told me that these were very grave accusations, and that the company had to take them seriously for legal reasons. I had to explain the entire miserable situation to them. I had to show them the text messages and the previous emails from Clara and my mom to prove the long pattern of harassment, and to show that the story in her email was completely false. I had to explain that there were no family funds, and that the money was my personal savings from my own salary. My boss and the HR representative were understanding in the end, as they could see from the evidence that I was the one being harassed. However, they told me very sternly that I had to make sure this family drama did not spill over into the workplace again. They documented the incident, and while they assured me it would not affect my job, it is now a part of my permanent employee record. I was forced to have a lawyer send a formal cease and desist letter to both my sister and my mother, demanding that they stop contacting me at my workplace. The stress from all of this is unbelievable, because my sister did not just try to embarrass me, she actively tried to damage my career and my professional reputation. This was no longer about getting help from me. This was clearly about getting revenge, because she could not get my money. She decided to try to hurt my ability to make money for myself. I am now looking into what legal options I have if this harassment continues, because I am almost certain that it will. Update 3. Hello again. A lot has happened since my last update, where I described the terrible incident of my mother showing up at my work and my sister emailing my boss. The legal letter that I sent seemed to work for a short while, as the emails and direct contact stopped for a time. However, the conflict has now escalated into something physical, and frankly, quite frightening. After the incident at my job, I made a conscious effort to completely wall myself off from them, and I went so far as to change my personal email address. I also tightened my social media privacy settings to the maximum level possible, and while it felt like I was living in a fortress, it seemed necessary for my own peace of mind. I focused on my work and on my plan to buy an apartment, and I actually put in an offer on a small place, which was accepted. For the first time in months, I felt a real sense of forward momentum in my own life. That sense of peace was completely shattered last weekend when we had a cousin who was getting married. I was very hesitant to go to the wedding because I knew my mother and sister would be there, but the cousin getting married is someone I have always been close to, and I did not want to miss her wedding because of their drama. I thought that we could, as adults, at least be civil in a public setting for a few hours for the sake of our cousin, but this turned out to be a significant miscalculation on my part. I arrived at the reception hall and did my best to keep a low profile, finding a table with some of my friends where I tried to just blend in. I saw my mother and Clara across the room, and I could feel them watching me. For about an hour, nothing happened, and they stayed on their side of the room while I stayed on mine, so I started to relax a little bit. Then, during a quieter moment when the band was on a break, Clara started walking deliberately towards my table. She was holding a glass of red wine, and her face was set in a hard, angry expression. As she approached, my friends at the table all tensed up, as they know parts of the story of what has been happening. Clara stopped right in front of me and did not say anything at first. She just stared at me with an intense look. Then she started talking. She said that she had seen on social media that I was buying an apartment, which a mutual friend must have mentioned. She then said that it must be nice to be buying a home while she was about to be kicked out of my mom's house because my mom can no longer afford to support her. I did not engage with her provocations and just looked at her, telling her that this was not the time or the place for this conversation. Her eyes narrowed at my response, and she said, "You have no heart. You are just like our father. Cold and selfish." The mention of our father, especially in that context, was a very low blow, and it was the same line my mother had used on me before, which seems to be their go-to weapon. At that point, I stood up from my chair and told her I was leaving, as I did not want to cause a scene at my cousin's wedding. As I turned to walk away, she did something I never would have imagined in my wildest dreams. She threw her entire glass of red wine all over me. The dark liquid covered the front of my dress, which was a light color and was instantly and completely ruined. The entire table gasped in shock, and people at nearby tables turned to look at the commotion. I was in shock for a second, but then an incredible amount of anger washed over me, and I turned back to face her. Before I could say or do anything, she lunged at me and started trying to scratch at my face, all while screaming about how I had ruined her life. It was a complete and total public meltdown in the middle of the wedding reception. My friends and a couple of my cousin's groomsmen jumped up and managed to pull her off of me while she was still screaming and struggling against them. My mother then rushed over, but she did not come to control her daughter, she came to defend her actions. She immediately started yelling at me, asking me what I had said to set Clara off, trying to blame me for being physically attacked by her. The scene devolved into pure chaos, and the bride, my cousin, was in tears, watching her wedding get destroyed. Her new husband looked absolutely furious at the disruption. The wedding was completely ruined by their behavior. Security from the venue eventually came and escorted both Clara and my mother out of the building, and they were shouting insults the whole way. I was left standing there, covered in wine and shaking with anger. My cousin and her husband came over to apologize to me, which was absurd because it was not their fault. I told them I was fine, and that I was so sorry that their special day had been ruined by my family. I left shortly after that. The next day, I had visible scratches on my arms and neck from where Clara had grabbed me, so I went to the police station. I filed a formal report for assault against her, and I provided them with the names of the witnesses from my table and the contact information for the venue security team. I am done being passive in this situation, because my sister physically attacked me and my mother enabled and defended it. This is no longer just a family disagreement about money, it has become a serious matter of my personal safety. I have also been in contact with a lawyer about getting a restraining order against them, and that process has now been started. I never in my life thought that I would be taking legal action against my own sister and mother, but their escalating behavior has left me with no other choice. They have harassed me, tried to ruin my career, and now they have physically assaulted me in a public place. There is no coming back from this point, and any possibility of reconciliation, no matter how remote it might have seemed, is now completely gone. They have shown me who they truly are, and my priority now is to protect myself both legally and physically. Final update. This will be my final update on this entire matter. The events of the past few months have finally reached their conclusion, although it is not a happy one by any means. I am writing this mostly for my own sense of closure, and to document the final outcome for anyone who has followed this difficult story. After the assault at my cousin's wedding, I moved forward with the legal actions that I had mentioned in my last post. The police report that I filed led to official charges of assault being brought against my sister Clara, especially since there were more than enough witnesses who were willing to give statements about what they saw happen. The legal process is quite slow, but it is moving forward as it should. I was also successful in obtaining a restraining order against both Clara and my mother, which a judge granted after hearing my testimony and reviewing all the evidence I provided. This evidence included the emails they sent to my work, the documentation of my mother's visit to my office, and the official police report from the wedding assault. They are now legally required to stay away from me, my home and my workplace, and they are not allowed to contact me directly or indirectly. It may just be a piece of paper, but it provides a clear legal boundary that has severe consequences if it is ever crossed. The closing on my apartment went through without any issues, and I now live in my own home. It is a small place, but it is mine, and, more importantly, it is a quiet place of safety, where no one can show up unannounced to harass me. The process of moving and setting everything up has been a welcome distraction from everything else, and it feels like the one positive thing that has come out of this entire miserable year. The aftermath in our wider family has been grim and sad to watch. My mother and Clara have become completely isolated from everyone, because after the spectacle they made at the wedding, no one is taking their side anymore. My aunts, who were so quick to message me with their disappointment at the beginning, have been completely silent. I heard through my cousin that my mom has been calling them, trying to get them to talk to me on her behalf, or to lend her money, but they have all firmly refused to get involved any further. Clara's divorce from James is now final, and as everyone expected, the prenup was enforced fully and completely. She received none of his assets and no spousal support, and I heard she had to sell the car he had once given her just to pay for some of her initial legal consultations and her basic living expenses. My mother's financial situation is not good either, as she is on a fixed retirement income and simply cannot afford to support a second adult indefinitely. From what I have been told by my cousin, their relationship has become very strained, and they are living together in my mom's small house, where the stress and resentment are constant, leading to frequent and loud arguments. Clara has apparently not made any effort to find a job, and it seems she is still waiting for a magical solution to appear out of thin air. I have not seen or spoken to either of them since the wedding, and my life is much quieter now, though it is also lonelier. My mother and sister, for all their terrible faults, were a significant part of my life,